There is one more way to declare variables. So 3 different ways. Again, I recommend the colon equals because it's the least complicated way, and it's the way that I think you might see most of the time in code bases, unless there's a good reason to use the other ways. So this third way is to give a type to our variable that we're declaring. So we say variable greeting equals hello world, but now let's say variable greeting and let's give it a type. So in our case, the type of variable that we want to store inside of greeting will be a string. A string type is something in these double quotes, and so we can say variable greeting string like this equals hello world. So this is valid. If I run this, you can see we still get the same thing. Why am I getting 4 first? Oh, because I'm printing 4 first. Let's not cause confusion. So I can declare the variables in any order I want, right? You can see I declared the number 4 last, but I'm printing it first. So print, print, print. I declared these in any order I like, but I print them in a specific order down here. So let's not cause confusion. Let's put this here. Hit that format button. There we go. Run it. Yeah, so hello world, hello Frank, and the number 4. We're printing these in order. Now, again, you can put string here, and this is saying this greeting variable will be of type string, and it's going to say whatever we put on the right hand side is guaranteed to have these double quotes. I should be able to run it, and like I just did, and we get the correct output. If I say I want this to be a number, there's 2 types of numbers that we're going to focus on for now. Floats and integers. In our case, we'll say int, like this. Int is short for integer. It's just a number that doesn't have a decimal on it. Can be negative, can be positive, doesn't matter. So now if I try and run this, it's going to yell at me. Yep, error. Cannot use hello world untyped string constant as int value in variable declaration. That's a mouthful, and all that's saying is that the string can't be assigned to greeting because greeting has to be of type int. So if you want to be really specific about your variable, what can go in your variable, then this kind of longhand way of writing it is a better way to specifically say what you want inside of your variable. But again, there's no reason to not really use the shorthand in this example, so you could just say this colon equals. And now why does this work? Because Go is able to infer that this is going to be a string and assign it to greeting, so it automatically will infer it's a string instead of having to write var greeting string like this. It already knows it's going to be a string based on what's on the right hand side, so you don't have to write this longhand way. And that's the same reason we can write var greeting equals hello world. It can infer that this will be a string, so it doesn't have to be there. Again, I'd recommend the colon equals, but this is just another way to do it. So let's expand these other 2, string, and then var num. If I try and say var num string equals 4, we're going to error here because 4 is an integer, right? It's a number. It's not a string. So here we go. Untype int as string constant. So we're trying to assign an int to our string number 4. Now if I change this to int like this, run it. Yep, hello world, hello Frank, 4. Now if I try and do 4.5, I think we'll error here because it's a float. Yeah, so anything that's a decimal is considered a float in Go, and a float, like I say, it's just anything that's a decimal and not just a whole number, a counting number, so to speak, or a negative number. There can be negative decimals, in which case they're still floats. Cannot use untyped float type constant, which is this, as int in variable declaration. So I said num is going to be 4.5, but here this is a float and this is of type int. So if I want it to be a float, I have to say float. And you can see Go doesn't just take float as a keyword, you have to give it a specific value. So in my case, I'm going to say float 64. 64 just refers to the kind of the length of your float. I think 32 might be an option also. Your float can only be so long with a float 32, but float 64, your float can have extra length to it. So your decimal can have extra precision on the end of it. So just one thing to note there. You can also do this with like ints, but let me run this and show you this works. So we say 4.5 is a float. In our case, we have to say float 64, and we get 4.5. If you want to save a little bit of space, you can use a float 32, but for our purposes, I would just use float 64 everywhere for this specific tutorial. You can also say, just one more thing, is int. Instead of just saying int, I could also say int 64 like this, right? So int has options. I think it goes the whole way down to int 8, but an int 8 can only be so big. So 4 works, but if I use like, let's say 500,000, and another way to write numbers in Go is you can use this underscore, and it should work here. It definitely works in VS Code. Let's run this. Yeah, we're gonna get an error because it's too big, but this underscore does work. So let me show you that this works first with the underscore. I'm gonna say int64, run it. Okay, we can see we get 500,000, but if I change this to what I had before, which is an int 8, which I think only goes up to like 128 or something like that. An int 8 is a way to declare a small number that will hopefully save you just a little bit of space in your program, but for our purposes, we're just going to use int64 or just int, which I think the default is int is the default for int64 in Go. So when I ran this with int 8, we see variable declaration overflows. That means the number is too large to store inside of an int 8 type of variable. So again, it has to be something that is big enough to store it. In our case, int64 or just int. So that was a lot of information. For our tutorial, the 3 things that you need to know for right now, the 3 types of variables are string, like that, int, like this, and float 64. So float 64, we can't just say float. Go makes us use 64 or 32 on float. But int is kind of defaults from int64. So we can say string, int, and float are the 3 types of variable types that we'll need to know for now. We'll introduce more as we go, but for now these 3 will do.